for Native American tribes. Today, we proudly present our partner from Gallagher, Kathleen Schulz. She is the CHES Divisional Vice President, Global Innovation Leader, Organization Wellbeing for Gallagher. In today's sessions, she's going to show us employee needs and expectations have dramatically in the last 3 years have changed. New priorities are changing on how we feel about work, with being less willing to compromise on the priorities that are most important to them: purpose, work-life balance, and well-being. Employers have had to respond to fueling shifts in the culture and leader competencies. In this session, we will look at data and discuss culture, trust, leader influence, and how areas connect to impact employee and overall organizational well-being. Today's session will be recorded and will be on the NAHRA YouTube this coming Friday. And if you are THRP certified, Barb Griffin, who's on the call today, she will note that you attended today's session so you can receive credits through your THRP. So with that being said, I wanted to introduce to you, we have 2 board members on the call, and I would like to introduce to you first to Dorothy Sir.
Good morning. I'm happy to see everybody here, and I'm excited to hear and learn on this topic. So just welcome everybody. I'm glad you're here today and taking the time out to have coffee with us and do some learning. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Dorothy. And we also have Mike Caputo.
Good morning, everyone. Kathleen, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm looking forward to your presentation. Work-life balance, all the things that are very hot topics right now. So looking forward to hearing this topic. And good morning, everybody.
Good morning. With that being said, I introduce you to Kathleen.
Well, thank you, Janet, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for the nice welcome. Happy to be with you all today. If you can hear my dog barking in the background, I am sorry about that. There must be some deer in the backyard. I can remember when that would have totally made me completely stressed out and sweated, and now I'm just like, the deer will move and he'll stop barking, so hopefully that's not a huge interruption for you all. We have a lot to talk about today. I'm really excited. We're going to look at a lot of data. We're going to talk about some insights. We're just going to start talking about, like, what are we seeing out there? There's a lot of shifts. So let's start there with the emergence of this worth it equation. And I don't know if you all have kind of heard about the emergence of the worth it equation. And it's not that employees asking, is this job worth it? It's not that that's new. Like, certainly that happened before the pandemic, and it's happened forever. It's just the degree and the number of folks that are now asking themselves has exponentially increased. So employees are increasingly asking themselves, is this job worth it? You know, for the last 3 years or so, we've spent a lot of time thinking about the things in our lives that are important to us. And as Janet mentioned, employees are a lot less willing to compromise on those things that are important to them. Our priorities have changed, and it's changed how we feel about work and what we want from an employer. So the power has shifted, and employers have had to respond, and that's fueled this culture shift. So employees want to work for organizations that put purpose over profit, organizations that do good things, that are socially conscious, active in the community, organizations who support whole life integration, right? We talk about work-life balance, we talk about work-life integration, but increasingly employees want their employers to help them with their whole life because the lines are so blurry now. So whole life integration, and importantly, employers who think about well-being not necessarily as a program. Like, a wellness program generally has a start and a stop, right? We're really thinking well-being as part of the fiber of the organization, as a cultural imperative. And this culture shift has fueled a pretty dramatic leadership style shift. So nobody wants a boss anymore. We want to coach, we want to mentor, we want somebody that is going to support us, help us prioritize our own well-being, somebody who cares for us, and really importantly, somebody who, we're going to talk a lot about today, we've been capturing a lot of data around the importance of trust as an increasingly important business and health metric. So what are we doing about all this? We collect a ton of data at Gallagher, and it's been really interesting to kind of see how the data has ebbed and flowed throughout the pandemic. What stayed the same and what has changed? What we know is we can't keep doing it the way we've always done it. Too much has changed, like we've changed. 63% of adults feel changed forever as a result of the pandemic. So things that may have been effective before the pandemic, they may no longer resonate. They may no longer meet your business objectives. They may be relevant and resonate with your employees. So we asked, what are the top strategic priorities for attracting, retaining, and engaging talent in 2023? And here's what the data told us. Compensation analysis is number one. There is still a ton of work going on around compensation. Benchmarking, where's the market, what's everybody else doing, what's going on with pay equity as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. A lot of work in the compensation space, and we expect that to continue through 23 and probably into 24. But look at the next four. Number two, improving employee total well-being, revamping training and development initiatives, improving employee appreciation and recognition, and number five, preparing future leaders. So, these five are even ahead of optimizing benefit costs. They're ahead of enhancing DEI, fostering a psychologically and physically healthy work environment, improving hybrid work approaches, and enhancing PTO. So I don't know if there are any surprises there for you. I'm going to present a little bit data, and then I'm going to pause, and hopefully we can have a conversation around this. But I want to focus in on that number two, improving employee total well-being, because I think total is kind of the key word there. And I didn't put a data slide in on this, but I'll also share with you one of the data points that we collect are what are the top pain points for leaders? So what are the most pressing pain points for leaders? And in 2023, enhancing employee well-being is number one. So it's number one in terms of pain points. It's number two in terms of how organizations are really focusing their strategy in 2023. All right, so let's talk briefly about well-being. So what's going on with well-being and how are we thinking about it? And this data for me is really fascinating and really reflective of, I think, kind of where we are with well-being and how we're thinking about well-being. So this is a data point. Leaders are concerned about the impact of stress and burnout on their organization. 76% of responders agree with that, right? So we know leaders are really worried about stress and burnout. We have effectively created or sustained a culture of total well-being within our organization. 48% of responders agree with that. So we know stress and burnout is a really, really big problem. Less than half of organizations are saying that they effectively create or sustain a culture of total well-being within the organization. The next question is, what's your strategy? So what best describes your organization's well-being strategy? And this is where it gets really interesting for me. 45% say they have no strategy, which doesn't mean they're not doing anything. It could be that there are initiatives in place, but there's not governance and infrastructure built around what are we trying to accomplish with the well-being initiatives that we put in place. How do we know we're making progress? The key performance indicators that we're measuring to know that we've got the right initiatives in place, they're being used and valued by our employees, and there's an ROI on that. So a little less than half say that they're effectively creating a total well-being culture. A little less than half have no strategy in place at all, which makes me wonder, how are we doing that? 30% have a traditional well-being strategy, and that's very likely more aligned with like physical health. So maybe they're doing health fairs, biometric screenings, maybe they've got some gym memberships. Traditional well-being strategy is usually more historically focused on our physical health. And 25% say that they've got a total well-being strategy in place. Next question. What dimension of well-being has become more important since 2020? So no surprises here. In every single industry that we measure, emotional well-being has emerged as one of the most important components of total rewards, right? So emotional well-being has definitely emerged as the most important dimension of well-being, which makes sense, right? We know it's a leadership issue. It's a leadership issue. So hopefully we're starting to really make inroads that means in terms of how we action plan on it. This brings us to our last data point here in this kind of quagmire is our managers are well equipped to refer employees to mental health resources. Now, we all know that manager-employee relationship is one of the most important relationships that they have at work. Their manager is usually best positioned when a need arises with the employee to connect him to the right resource at the right time for the employee. Only 43% of responders could agree that their managers were well equipped to refer employees to mental health resources. So even when organizations are kind of investing in good resources, if nobody uses those resources, no one's better off, not the organization and not the employee. And I think particularly with the conversation around mental health, I'm anxious to get your thoughts on this. It can be a scary conversation. Like, it's daunting, for someone to have a conversation with someone around mental health. If they don't feel comfortable or if they don't feel confident to have that conversation, very likely they're not going to do it, right? So, understanding, probably one of the major trends we're seeing coming out of the pandemic is a need for manager effectiveness training, particularly around mental health and emotional well-being. I think the other thing here is that, for a lot of managers, we've historically told them to stay away from this conversation. We've kind of said, hey, keep your conversations with employees, keep it about performance. Here's the line. Let's not cross over it. Like, let's keep the conversations around performance. And now we're asking them to have a really different conversation. So we need to help them understand how to have that conversation so they have it, and we can have a positive impact here. So this data is a little bit all over the place, but I don't think that's bad. I think it just kind of reflects where we are. I think we're having some growing pains in terms of how we're thinking about well-being, but I also think we're going in the right direction. This is kind of how we think about organizational well-being, how all these things connect. And what I know about organizational well-being is that's usually what we are aspiring to help you achieve. You cannot get there unless you have employees who are well, right? So we generally are focused on the outcomes, right? How do we get positive outcomes for your business, your people, and the customers that you are serving? In order to get to those positive outcomes, you have to understand everything that's going to be a threat, right? And that means, from our perspective, you have to go all the way back to the beginning and really dive into the culture. It's the culture within the organization. It's the leadership messages. It's the leadership behaviors. It's your policies. Are they in sync with your culture? What's the degree of trust within your organization? Are you measuring it? What is your commitment to DEI? Your benefit strategy, your compensation strategy, how recognized and appreciated your employees feel. We saw that it's one of the top 5 initiatives for attracting and retaining talent in 2023. And then what's your communication strategy? What's the tone? What's the frequency? How are you leveraging communication to keep your employees connected and to help them make good choices around their benefits? It's the culture within the organization that is going to significantly influence employee behavior. Employee behavior around their own health and fitness, employee behavior around how they treat your customers, employee behavior around how productive and engaged they are, how they use and value their benefits, behavior, period. Culture drives employee behavior drives organizational risk drives outcomes. It is all connected. So I want to just kind of pause there before we go into this next section around culture and just get your thoughts. Like, does this resonate with how you're thinking about well-being? Are you thinking about it differently? And maybe what are you doing in this space?
I think it covers a lot of everything that we're looking at here at our property. We're getting ready to kick back off our all of our wellness things that we used to do. With COVID, we got out of a lot of our in-person events, so we're starting to bring some of that back. As far as the work-life balance, and I'm sure you're probably going to cover it, one of the things that we've been kind of tossing around is work-life flexibility. And I know it kind of sounds like the same thing, but it seems like when we talk work-life balance, the personal life seems to be more the priority. where like work-life flexibility seems to, in my mind, have a little bit more of that true balance between work and personal. Because the one thing that I think is really interesting is I've never seen so many people protective of their own time while they're on company time before. And it's just an interesting and different thought to kind of think about. So I don't know if there, but those are just some of the things that have been kind of resonating here at least.
Yeah, we've definitely seen like a pivot. Like we used to historically, for many of us, work was the center of our universe. And we kind of lived our lives around that center. And that's flipped. So now, you know, many are trying to really keep their lives the center of their universe, and they're trying to figure out how to work productively around their lives. And it sounds like a small shift, but it's a massive shift in terms of the way people are thinking. So I appreciate you sharing. Anybody else want to kind of chime in with maybe how they're thinking about these things, or some of the tactics that you may be launching or considering? Right, I'll come back to this. I'm very sensitive to the fact that this is coffee talk and not just 100% Kathleen talk. So I'll come back. There's a couple times during the presentation where I'm just going to want to, you know, get some input from the group on if this data is resonating with you, or if it's not, and you're seeing something that's completely different. All right, so let's talk about culture. Again, under this notion that all of these pieces are connected. And if we just go back to this slide for 1 second, you know, this risk bucket, I would say that, you know, that's really where most organizations focus, particularly when we're talking about benefit strategy. And I get that, right? We want to understand the risk within the population, risk related to medical, pharmacy, health, and we want to understand those risks so we can put in solutions to reduce the risk and improve the health of your population while also having a positive impact on your healthcare costs. It makes complete sense. But I also know one of the major issues, the biggest issue with implementing a lot of those benefit resources is getting people to use those resources. And often what gets in the way of people using them to improve their health, using them and valuing them as part of the employee experience, it's over in that culture bucket. So, you know, that's generally why that's really important to kind of start there so that by the time you get to the point where you're implementing some of those really important benefit resources, you're making those investments, they're going to be relevant and resonate with your employees, and they're going to be in a position to actually use them and value them. All right, so let's look at a little bit more data here. So for anybody who doesn't know who this is Dr. Murthy. This is our U.S. Surgeon General, and he did something really remarkable in the fall. On October 20th, he issued a U.S. Surgeon General advisory warning around toxic workplaces. And the advisory warning was specific to toxic workplaces and the harm that they cause to physical and mental health. And I remember when he issued this advisory back in the fall, I mean, full transparency, at first I wasn't super impressed, right? I'm like, this is pretty intuitive. It kind of validated what we already know to be true. So if there are issues around culture, yes, it's going to have an impact on productivity and engagement and retention. Yes, it's going to have an impact on people's health. But I have spent quite a bit of time really thinking about this. And where I landed was, you know, there is no higher voice around public health in the United States of America than the Surgeon General. So the U.S. Surgeon General is getting into the conversation around workplace culture as a public health issue. That's remarkable, and I'm not sure that's ever happened before. So this is a really important validation on why we really need to be focused on workplace culture. And people ask me all the time, all right, Kathleen, you know, we have some extra carrier dollars, you know, how should we reinvest them for wellness? Should we buy some Peloton bikes? Should we maybe buy some, you know, Apple Watches? And those are all really cool ideas, and they're not bad. I mean, you know your people, you know what's going to be relevant with them. But honestly, one of the most significant initiatives that you can take on in order to improve the overall well-being of your employees is get your managers in a better place and to really focus on your culture. Culture drives behavior, behavior drives risk, risk drives outcomes. I think that's pretty intuitive when we're talking about work performance, but what about mental health? We're going to get back to that. All right, so let's focus in on this deep dive around culture.
Kathleen?
Yeah.
There,
Yep.
we have something from Jawan on the chat box.
Okay. I can't see it. Would you mind reading it to me?
Okay. No, absolutely. Do you believe one of the many reasons for high turnover rate would be from cause of the mental health in employees?
I think it's a contributor. I think it's there's a lot of variables that go into that conversation, but I mean, there's no medical code for culture, right? There's no ICD-9 code for culture, but think about the employee who doesn't feel like they belong. Think about the employee who may be working in an environment where they don't get along with their manager, they don't feel like they can contribute, they don't feel like they count, they don't feel like they can show up and be their whole self. That is absolutely going to impact their physical and mental health and contribute to whether they stay or whether they go. So I would say absolutely, but it is kind of a loaded question. There's a lot of variables that go into that. Did that answer the question?
Joanne, did you want to add to that?
Okay.
Yeah,
I saw that.
Oh, good. Yes.
Good. All right. Thank you. All right. So let's dive into this whole conversation around culture, and even just level set. I know everybody on the phone right now knows what culture is. Like we all know what culture is, but just to kind of put us all on the same page, this is how we're thinking about culture. It's how we do the things we do, how we communicate within an organization, how we celebrate, how we make decisions, how we reward and recognize. It's how we behave within the organization. And when I think about culture, I often think about it. I travel a lot for my job, and I'm on a lot of planes. So I often think about culture as I think about tailwinds and headwinds. And a really strong culture is like a great tailwind where you are moving faster. It is a less bumpy ride. You use less fuel, so it costs less money, takes less energy by the team. You get to goal quicker, and generally it's a smoother ride and a more enjoyable ride. When I think about really toxic cultures, it's like a headwind, right? Things are just harder. You move slower, costs more money, uses more energy from the team, and it's generally there are some bumps along the way, and it takes longer to achieve the goal. So we may come back to that tailwind, headwind in our conversation. But the next question is, whose job is it to develop and shape culture? And this is really important. And if we were face to face, well, let me ask the group, whose job do you think it is? Maybe we can kind of put some answers out there on the chat. Everyone.
I believe it often stems from the top where we're at, and I believe that at some point it trickles down onto, but I do agree. It definitely is an everybody thing. It's an everyone thing. The contribution for such strength in that capacity, absolutely an everybody thing. But I do think that it really genuinely begins from the top.
I agree, and I think it's really important to understand that from an employee perspective, they think it's the leader's job. So yes, we all have, if I was answering this, I probably would have answered an individual a little bit higher because that's me. But from an employee perspective, employees really believe that it's leaders and managers' job to develop and shape the culture. And I get the honor of working with a lot of leaders, and I can tell you that even the most self-aware leader is probably underestimating the power of their influence on everyone around them. The leader's behavior is contagious to everyone around them, and that can be awesome or not so much. So it's probably one of the most important things that we talk about today is the power of leader influence and making sure that leaders understand how their behavior is impacting everyone around them. And again, I think intuitively we know that connection between leaders, managers, and employee performance. but there's also a connection around mental health. So this is a little bit hard to do in a virtual environment, so I'm just going to kind of walk through this, asking you, who's got the greatest impact on your mental health? Is it your spouse? Is it your doctor? Is it your manager? Is it your therapist? What do you think? Now, these are the only 4 choices, and I know for any of you who have children like I do, I might have answered this a little bit differently as my kids drive me crazy. But with these 4 choices, you know, who would you say has the greatest impact on your mental health? Your manager. Anybody else want to guess? Well, most of the time when I use this slide, people say spouse, that their spouse has the greatest impact on their mental health, and they're right. The surprise is that your manager is tied with your spouse as having the greatest impact on your mental health, more than your doctor, more than your therapist. And I think the surprise and the concern comes in with how many leaders are unaware. So over a third of employees, 35% of employees, say that their manager fails to recognize the impact that they are having on their team's mental health. So this power of leader influence in enhancing awareness with leaders to understand that their behavior is contagious to their work group is increasingly important. All right. So one of the things that, you know, again, I look at a lot of data, and one of the things that I really wanted to track was so much has changed during the last 3 years. Like, what should we even be tracking? Like, what are the metrics that are going to be most important to determining future business success? So we asked this question in 2022, and we just asked it again in 2023. In 2022, these were the top 3, and there was probably 12 to 14 answer options, and these were the top 3. Number 1, employee engagement. Number 2, turnover. Number 3, leadership trust. We asked the same exact question with the same exact answer options in 23. We got the same top 3. The only thing that had changed was the percentage of responders who had employee engagement, like as their number 1, doubled. So measuring employee engagement is increasingly important for determining future business success. We also asked, what are the most important leader competencies? You know, again, knowing that, you know, there is definitely a shift away from authoritative styles, kind of going back to the Worth It equation we talked about. Employees want mentors, they want coaches. The competencies have changed, and there are a lot of skill gaps out there. So what should we even be focused on? In 2022, flexibility and adaptability was number 1. Communicating effectively was number 2. Building trust was number 3. 2023, we asked the same exact questions, same exact answer options. We had the same exact top 3, but the order changed. So this year in 2023, the most important leader competency for determining future success is the ability to communicate effectively. Being flexible and adaptable is number 2. The ability to build trust is number 3. And, you know, when you look at all these things, all of them are connected, right? So if you're in an organization that has really high employee engagement, you likely have a high degree of leadership trust and probably more lower turnover rates than some competitors. And if your leaders are really good at communicating effectively, they are likely to be a little bit more flexible and adaptable, and they are likely to probably be more, probably have more skill at the ability to build trust with their work teams. So let's hone in on this, you know, this area around trust. And once I saw this data starting in 2022, I decided to, you know, really dive into this as it's become this increasingly important kind of business and health metric. And why do we need to care about trust? Well, here's what we know about employees in high trust organizations. They are a whole lot less stressed. They have more energy at work, they're more productive, they use fewer sick days, they're 76% more engaged. And again, employee engagement is that number 1 top metric for determining future business success. They are a whole lot more likely to recommend your institute as a great place to work. We need that, right? Our employees should be our biggest brand advocates. We want them telling everybody what a wonderful place your organization is to work. They feel 66% closer to their colleagues, and they're 40% less likely to experience burnout. So understanding trust is becoming increasingly important, we asked, to what degree is your organization focused on strengthening trust in leadership? Here's what we found. So less than half of the responders to our last survey, which had over 600 organizations participate, less than half were really focused on strengthening trust in leadership. And here's how it connects back to our health. And that's like everything that we're talking about. It not only impacts performance and our ability to attract, retain, and engage talent, it impacts people's health and well-being, and it will show up in your healthcare costs. So we think about stress, and stress gets a bad rap. Usually when we're talking about stress, we're talking about it in a negative way. But the reality is we like stress. We just like it in the right amount, right? So all the way over on the left there, if we don't have enough stress in our life, it is actually very common for us to underperform. We get kind of bored. We procrastinate. We're inactive. It's as that stress level kind of moves into that healthy range that we really, we get motivated. We are sharp. We are focused. There's a healthy tension. We are working towards being at peak performance. The problem comes when there's no recovery period. So generally, when we have a stressor, there's a stressful event, there's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end, and then there's a recovery period. So we get stronger and more resilient in the recovery period. And one of the issues for the last 3 years is that there really hasn't been a recovery period. It's been all stress all the time. So if we are at a chronic level of stress, that peak performance, that's when we kind of go up and over and we slide down into what we call toxic stress, which increases our likelihood of exhaustion and fatigue and burnout and experiencing loneliness and actually experiencing and developing chronic disease. So one of the important things about that healthy, area is what happens when we have like the right amount of healthy stress in our lives. Our bodies actually create oxytocin, which is a hormone. And oxytocin is known as the trust hormone. So the reason why it's known as the trust hormone is because what it fuels in our body is the desire to collaborate. And it fuels the desire to want to be connected to the people around you. That connectedness and that collaboration is foundational to our ability to build trust. So again, it's the connection points. That collaboration and that desire to want to be connected to the folks around you is also really key to resiliency. I've talked a lot about resiliency in the last 3 years. Here's what we know about resiliency. The single most powerful predictor of human resilience is interpersonal support. It is the people around you, which gets us back to the conversation around culture. What we know about resiliency is there is a genetic component to it. Like some of us just have more genetic levels of resiliency than others. And you probably know somebody, and maybe you even are this person who, like, whatever it is, whatever happens, they just kind of roll with it. Something happens, they roll with it, doesn't seem to faze them, they move on to the next thing. They likely have a higher genetic component of resiliency. I will tell you, I am not that person. So the good thing about resiliency is we can all build it. It's kind of like a muscle that you can build and you can flex. It's not all nature. We all have it. There's nobody who has zero resilience. We can learn to develop it. We can learn to grow it. It is about the support around you and the ability to stay connected. When we enhance our levels of resiliency, we reduce the potential for burnout. Burnout continues to be a very significant leadership issue. It was the #1 leadership issue last year, and it is horrific to eroding employee engagement. So if we have lower levels of resiliency, it actually increases the potential for burnout. Burnout destroys employee engagement, that #1 predictor of future business success, and employee engagement and well-being are connected and influence each other. So I'm getting close to kind of, the end of the data component of this, because I'm really anxious to hear from you and get your thoughts on this. So, as we're thinking about how all these things connect and the role of the leader and the power of their influence and the changing competencies, we really need to be focused on these emotions and behaviors and skills that optimize performance, health, and happiness. And there are these behaviors, being able to lead with gratitude, compassion, empathy, realistic optimism. There is such a thing as toxic optimism. That person who is extremely well-intentioned, but always yeah, everything's great, everything's fine, they actually can have the opposite effect and unintentionally have a decrease in engagement, because the reality is nothing's awesome all the time, so unrealistic optimism is not always helpful. Realistic optimism is really powerful. Being supportive, being caring, and again, that kind of ties back to what employees are looking for in a boss, or not a boss, a mentor or coach on our worth it equation. So these positive emotions when leaders, or anyone, right? Because the reality is we are all leaders. We're all the leaders of our own life. Every single one of us is influencing the behavior of everyone around us at work, at home, and in your community. Positive behaviors, these positive behaviors are good for us. So leading with empathy and being supportive and caring, it's good for your health. It is also good for everyone around you, and it helps build resiliency. Increased resiliency, lower burnout. Burnout erodes employee engagement, which is connected to well-being. The key is we have to be able to deliver on these positive emotions and behaviors in a way that is authentic and sincere and genuine, and that may require us to be a little bit vulnerable. And not everybody's comfortable with being vulnerable, particularly at work, right? So this is another area where we can spend some time and hopefully do some manager effectiveness training, because when we do these things well, when we're authentic and when we're sincere and we're willing to be a little bit vulnerable, it absolutely helps build trust, right? And we've talked about the value of trust within an organization, and we've got that trust, and we've got an environment that can support positive psychological safety. We started our conversation talking about the whole person comes to work. Well, you know better than I do, with the labor market being the way it is right now, we need every ounce of good work and good thoughts and innovation from every single employee. We can't have anybody holding back. If employees are coming to work in an environment where they don't feel like they can be their whole self, where they feel like they can't contribute ideas for fear of repercussion, or their manager's not going to like that, or they just don't feel like they belong, they're not going to contribute. They're going to hold back. And if they're holding back, it's going to have a negative impact on innovation, which every organization is focused on right now. Innovation is the key to growth. So when we're doing all these things well, we're building resiliency, we've got a trusting environment, we're creating this culture of psychological safety, we're fueling innovation, and we're really talking about the power of organizational well-being. So my final thoughts here before we kind of have our open discussion is to remember the power for how all of these things are connected. The culture within an organization is going to significantly influence the employee behaviors. Employee behaviors will impact organizational risk. Organizational risk will impact outcomes for your business, your people, and the customers that you are serving, around your ability to, retain employees, on your ability to optimize and manage your healthcare costs, and on the reputation of your brand out in the market, based on your employees and being brand champions. So all of these things are connected. And then for you, if you're on this call, obviously you're a leader. But here's the thing, you can't pour from an empty glass. So, we used to say, put your air mask on first. I think it's really important for all of us to be aware of the power of our own influence and promoting and modeling well-being. There's some HR folks who are just outstanding. Inspiring, make me humbled when I work with these folks at how much they care for their employees, how much they care for their organizations, at the same time not caring as much for themselves. So putting everybody else first. Their employees are first, the leaders are first, the organization's first, and they're saying and doing the right things, but they're not doing them themselves. So they're actually eroding their own credibility within the organization, even though they really mean it. They really mean it when they say unplug, when you're on vacation, don't feel the need to, be sending emails at 2 a.m. Make sure you're doing what you need to do to support your emotional and physical well-being. But if they're sending emails on Saturday morning, if they're sending emails at 2 a.m., if they're not following their own advice, it is eroding the value of their their words and eroding their credibility. So, make sure that you value and promote and model your own well-being so that you give license to everyone around them to be able to, really prioritize their well-being. So with that, I wanted to open it up to the group to just get your thoughts. I just presented a lot of data and a lot of kind of themes from what we're seeing out in the marketplace. Does this resonate with you? Are you seeing the same things, and what are you doing about it?
Kathleen, I just have a comment in regards to when you're saying, promoting and being in leadership. I oversee our one of my duties is overseeing our recruitment staff. So, and I don't know if anybody else on the group is in recruitment, but you probably know how frustrating it is right now with the turnover, with the applicant pool. My recruiters, they tend to, I always have to remind them, don't take it personal. When we hire someone, we put all this effort in, and they're gone 2 weeks later. It gets frustrating to them, and so I constantly remind them, don't take it personal. I've encouraged them, go for more walks, get away from your desk, do something for yourself, do what makes you happy with, just to keep them, so they're not getting burnt out. It is, this topic is more so lately, and with I've had some great leaders in the past that have taught me to always stay calm, and take care of yourself, so you can take care of others. So, and I always encourage that with my staff. We have a new EAP here, and our health benefits coordinator has done a great job of promoting that, getting the word out. We have a big display in the hallway, employee hallway, to give all the information to our staff to let them know. We've had crises on site here, and we've always had a good response with people, our local clinic coming on site, our we have a new EAP, and with the recent crisis, they were really good. So I just wanted to make those comments that I would say just keep encouraging your staff if you are in leadership, and find out, ask them, what would help you, what can we do to help you? Just keep that communication, and I believe trust is number one. I think you hit the nail on the head there. When you trust who you're working for and who you're working with, it makes a large, it's a big impact on your daily, it makes you want to come to work and do your job at 110%. So those are just my comments, Kathleen. I thank you for
I appreciate that so much, and thank you for jumping in. And it's interesting, I had told Janet my challenge for today was I have 100 things that I wanted to talk about. It was narrowing it down so that we could have enough time to talk about it. But one of the things that we've been tracking, and I'm happy to follow up with the data on this, is when we talk about trust as trust or lack of trust is a serious headwind, right? So one of the things we wanted to measure was, okay, we have a lot of ways to measure and reward performance. We don't have a lot of ways to measure and reward trustworthiness. And even when we measure it, we generally don't weight it the same way we measure performance. So it's not uncommon for a person to wind up in a leadership role because they're really competent, but if they don't have trust in their team, it is almost impossible for them to lead a high-performing team. So one of the things that we're measuring is, you know, who's including trust within their performance review system, and it's under 30%. But we asked, are you doing it now, or are you not, or are you considering it? And I was pretty heartened to see quite a few the percentage for organizations who were considering it is growing, and I'm happy about that. The other thing, Dorothy, that I love that you mentioned is around appreciation and recognition. You know, that's a whole topic in and of itself on how to effectively deliver appreciation and recognition. It sounds so basic, like it's not hard, right? Somebody does something nice or they do a good job, you say thank you, like it's not hard. But to really optimize the power of appreciation and recognition, you have to deliver it in a way where it lands with the employee receiving it and in a way that helps them emotionally connect to the organization, right? We want to enhance loyalty. We want to enhance employee engagement. And, you know, part of how we deliver recognition equates to how we like to receive it individually. And that could be really different than the person you're trying to recognize. So there's a whole conversation around recognition and the effective delivery that we could have fun with another day. But I appreciate your comments. Anybody else want to chime in on some of the things that they're doing and seeing?
Hi, Charles. I'm calling from New Mexico here, and really like the presentation. And one of the things that resonated with me is just what you said right there at the end there about the competencies. I think that's one thing we see with the leaders. We have very competent leaders, but to no fault of their own, they've never been given a lot of those soft skills. And in the past, they could get away with just being a competent leader. And one of the things we've done to recognize that is we're doing a 16-week, 1 day a week. All of our supervisors or managers are going through soft skill leadership training, just really understanding those soft skills of coaching, having a difficult conversation, the flexibility. And we're seeing a different mindset through that, is just recognizing the different leadership styles in the group. They're recognizing that, you know, I might have 10 employees and have 10 different leadership styles that I have to address with them. So I think it's been very valuable that we've taken a step back a little bit on focusing so much on competency training and really trying to hit the intangibles and hit those soft skills with our, just like I said, the managers and supervisors that are directly engaged with them. It's been very rewarding. And I like the last slide too, there where you said you can't pour from an empty glass, though, too, is with my HR team just Friday, as a matter of fact, we were kind of discussing some of the progress we're doing, and we're focusing. We kind of talk about, every time we meet, we talk about the 3 R's, and we do recruiting, retention, and rewards. And what are we doing in those 3 areas, making sure that we're hitting all of them. And the team was doing a great job talking about, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. And as you just stated right there, I said, okay, well, are we doing it and modeling it though? And I think of it, I guess, being older, I think of it as like a parent. You know, we can tell our kids a lot of times what to do, but they're going to follow our actions. And we've got to make sure as HR leaders that we're modeling, and because they're watching us and they're going to see that. So I think overall what you presented is great, but you know, we've got to really collaborate and work with those managers and supervisors to give them those soft skills.
Yeah, the investment that in leadership training is very, very impressive. So I'm kudos to you and your organization on that. It's funny, you know, you mentioned soft skills, and I've started to not use soft skills. I've started calling those traditional soft skills just human skills, right? Because they may be soft, but they're really hard to master. I mean, it is hard to master some of those skills, those human skills, those soft skills. It's a whole lot harder than reading a financial report, that's for sure. There's so much finesse, there's so much nuance. So yeah, I've started kind of calling them human skills versus soft skills, but really impressed at the investment that you're making with your team. That inspires me.
Thank you, and I am changing that out too. I like that. It's going to be human skills over here from now on. So.
Love it.
Which I think is incredible, right, Kathleen? Just to be, naturally, I think that for people that just come with those, they're equipped with human skills, if you will. I think that it becomes such a surprising aspect that they're not naturally coming, right? And I don't think that I necessarily realized specifically that competency over compassion or empathy or, any of those soft skills, human skills, somebody with a big heart, it is usual and accustomed, even for our entities as a whole, as long as you come with the right background and you are in fact competent, we bypass the idea of like, are you compassionate? Are you empathetic? Is somebody going to be able to trust you? Is somebody going to be able to, be able to work for you in that dynamic? So I really like that you guys brought that to attention, because I don't necessarily believe that I truly understood that competency over human skills is something that naturally happens in entities. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and it's, the competencies are changing. So there's a lot of skill gaps out there. And, for leaders on your teams who may have some skill gaps in some of these kind of human skill competencies, it doesn't mean they're a bad leader or a bad person. Like, it just means they need some help. Like so that's all that it means. Just like, we would.
Yeah. I totally agree. I feel like a competent person that has a very strong approach would be able to develop something extremely beautiful. I totally agree. I think competency is extremely important. But I think because I have such a human nature, that those other aspects, like being graceful is of extreme importance as well. But I do believe that competency is a very, very powerful aspect in leadership as well. So yeah.
Maybe I can follow up and include this slide if it would be helpful to you. But when we look at the data, employees would rather work with or for someone that has medium, even low competency, but high trustworthiness.
And it's because of that connection, right? And I know for myself specifically, like I would prefer that human connection before I had, that very strong, battle with somebody that was competent, yeah. So, but humanness is like one of the very first things that I yearn for. So that's how I thrive. So this was a really, really good presentation.
Tailwind, it's a tailwind. Less headwinds. We need less headwinds.
Yeah, we started. We've always done exit interviews at our company, but we actually went with a online format where it sends you a link and we can kind of compile the data a little differently. Before we kind of just went over the basics, why are you leaving, where are you going, those kind of stuff. One of the things that's one of the most surprising is one is more people leave because of management than pay, right? I mean, they're still the top two, but when we break down the questions that we ask, everybody that's filled up the exit interview has said that they felt like their management communicated with them and that they were given real-time feedback on their performance, but where management was lacking was in support. So when you talked about the idea of like team members or employees are not like, they don't like the authoritarian style leadership now, what I read just from that little quick blurb in our exit interviews is they want somebody that's willing to work next to them, do the job, take the crap that the guests give, and be that buffer for them so they can be supported. So it's a really, really interesting, again, we've only ran this we've only had like 16 or 17 people complete this survey, and it's already just jumping off the page that our managers, if we can't be transactional anymore, you have to really be in that. Now, your slide really resonates as well. And just like Charles, we have leadership training going on as we speak now, but we need to check in with our managers and supervisors. You can't pour from an empty glass. So are they feeling supported, right? Because it's easy to kind of put that on them. But if they're not feeling like they have a break, and I don't know if you've seen my comment, but I really like the idea of how you talked about building stress and resiliency. I mean, if I want to run a marathon, I can't go run 26 miles every day, right? So why is it that we approach, leadership projects and work like that? So really good points.
It's incredible what just a human exchange can do, genuinely. I've realized over the years that just even a soft face, right? Like because human resources, I think naturally is like the principal's office, right? So nobody ever wants to come to human resources ever, especially in our entity over at the government. So I worked there for 4.5 years. But as soon as a nice little face and, you know, an embrace, like, you know, I think that we got more visitors. And yeah, I just think that it's crazy what sort of exchange, you know, just a nice, soft, gracious exchange could do to team building.
Janet, there was a few things in the chats. I don't know if you wanted to read them. So, but I seen a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Let's see here. Let me see where I left off. Okay, I'm going to go back to Jawan. Yes, we currently see the same issues that we have talked about. The way that we are correcting is do an employee questionnaire. Also, starting to get training manuals for all the positions. Joanna agreed with Dorothy. Then Aspen, right after we came back from the pandemic, we noticed a stark difference in our staff's priorities, namely with their personal time and work-life balance. I really appreciate the way you called it work-life flexibility, because we certainly have seen staff prioritizing the life side of that balance to be determinant of the work side. Jawan had, what are some tips to give to an HR employee on this topic? Who do HR professions go to for this issue, since HR is the first point of connect for the company's employees? Do you have any suggestions, a third-party hotline?
Who does HR go to for, I'm sorry, what's the issue?
Who do HR professions go to for this issue? I guess, is Jawan still on the call? I do not want to speak for Jawan on what this means.
Well, if I can try to read into that, you know, HR for HR is really important, like developing your network so that you've got kind of your people that you can, you know, you kind of need to build, you know, your collaborative spirit, so that you've got folks that can help build you up, build your community, maybe even sometimes just vent to, and they get it, right? Like, 'cause sometimes, you know, we just need that. The other thing that I wanted to comment on that she mentioned was employee surveys. So, you know, not one client that I work with has money to waste. Everybody's budget is tight, and really making sure that you spend your budget on the areas of your business that are going to be most important for you meeting your business objectives, but are also going to be most relevant to your employees. The only way to do that is to really ask them, is to pull your employees into the conversation so that your strategy is relevant and will resonate with what they want. And the reality is what they need and want has changed dramatically over the last 3 years. So there's a lot of like just reevaluating, is the stuff that we have in place, is it the right stuff? I mean, I probably shouldn't say stuff. Are the resources and benefits that we have in place, are they still the right resources and benefits? Are there some that just employees just, you know, they're not resonating with, they're not using? Can we get rid of some of those benefits and reallocate some of those costs to some new areas that weren't even on the radar 3 years ago, particularly a lot of areas around mental health. So we're doing a lot of that, like inventorying right now to say, what all even do we have? Because, you know, there's so many organizations, and we saw a lot of this during the pandemic. We saw so many organizations being really well-intentioned and just knowing they needed to get resources in place to help their employees. So they kind of just acted, and they said, we'll worry about strategy later. Like, let's get stuff in place. Our employees need help. Let them know we care. But now it's later. And now there's a whole lot of like, we put this stuff in, or is anybody using it? Did it value it? Does it make sense? Should we still spend money on it? So there's a lot of evaluation, a lot of pause and reflect moments going on right now. And hearing from your employees is a really important way, or a really important part of that evaluation process to ensure you're spending your budget dollars in the right areas.
I don't want to answer for her either, but if I go back to when I seen it pop up, it was during building the resiliency and also like again what mental health programs and stuff you have like that. Like, so I would say again, even though we're the facilitators as HR professionals, we should be bringing in the resources that we can use too, right? I think sometimes we forget, hey, I refer EAP all day, but it's okay for me to call AUP when I'm struggling as well. I would also say, and it's not a plug for us, but I would say that's what NAHRA is here for, right? Like when you get around like-minded people that are struggling or are seeing the same patterns, sometimes just to be able to like feel normal when you vent, like, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. We're doing the same thing. Like that is such a strong human thing. One of my favorite things about the conference is my first couple times going just as a member was like, oh my gosh, everybody feels the same way as I do. And for me, I felt more included than feeling like it was hopeless. So that's my thought on it.
I appreciate that. I know we're at time, so I'm so grateful to all of you. Thank you for coming today. Appreciate it. It's been fun for me to chat with you all. I hope this was valuable for you. And Janet, I will hand it back to you.
Awesome. I have included in the chat box, if you would like to get a copy, the session is being recorded, but Kathleen has been gracious enough to share her presentation. Her email address, I included in the chat box. If you would like to reach out to her and talk about more, I can sit here and listen to Kathleen all day. Kathleen, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, and your encouraging words. It was a really great talk today.
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me. Take care, everybody.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.